And the next thing I want to hit today, topic for today, you may have known, we've talked about in the show before, Sidney Powell. She's a U.S. attorney, a former U.S. attorney. She's the author of License to Lie. She's a fabulous prosecutor, former U.S. prosecutor. She is now the attorney for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. He is the one caught up very early on in the Mueller investigation and the whole effort to try to bring down President Trump. This whole coup attempt, frame up, cooked up with inside the FBI and Department of Justice, aimed against President Trump, aimed to try to bring him down. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was one of the early victims of this Mueller witch hunt, and he ended up pleading guilty for a whole bunch of reasons we can't go into today, but he pled guilty essentially because he was arm twisted and frankly drained of his financial resources. He ended up really in a terrible position where, and the guy, this is truly a, whatever he is, 3 or 4 star general. This is a guy who's actually an American hero who, while we're all sitting at home being comfortable and showing up at college campuses doing idiotic protests, he's out there across the world defending America. That guy is one Mueller went after. And so he does not yet have, he has been cooperating with the Mueller team. Now he's not. He has Sidney Powell as his attorney. And what I want to get around telling you was Sidney Powell, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn's attorney, filed what I labeled a firebomb filing this past Friday. I want to share with you a tiny clip. Sidney Powell, was interviewed. It was actually Greg Jarrett interviewed her on Neil Cavuto's show. But here, I want to play her clip, and then we can talk about it.
Are you considering withdrawing the guilty plea?
That is not what I want to see happen here. I'm expecting, frankly, that we find evidence that warrants dismissal of the case for egregious government misconduct. But like I said, I want to know the truth. That's what I want to know first, and I can't even evaluate the validity of the plea until I have all the evidence.
Okay. We've had her on the show many times, and I'm sure we'll have her on again. She lives in Dallas. In fact, I want to mention to you, if you're watching this show for the first time, if you go to our YouTube page, America Can We Talk, or you go to my website, americacanwetalk.org, or if you're right here on Facebook, wherever you are watching, you can go to an interview I did with Sidney Powell several months ago. It was here in Dallas. It was a program for a big audience, but I got to be on stage asking her questions. The reason you might want to listen to it, it's a really good background to all of what the Mueller witch hunt was, what it did, what it was intended to do, where they were headed until, they finally got stopped. And we're going to see what if we turn out having Attorney General Barr be able to actually prosecute some of these wrongdoers for what they just entire coup frame-up attempt against President Trump. But on this subject of what Sidney Powell filed on Friday on behalf of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, she filed it's called a motion to compel. And that's just, I'm a lawyer by background, and so I filed those too. You can basically file them saying, I asked the judge, you ask the judge to compel the other party to produce material that they should have produced you, but they did not. So she filed a motion to compel, and what she's talking about is Brady evidence. There's a law, there's a long-standing rule in criminal prosecution that if you're the prosecutor and you have any evidence whatsoever that the defendant, that would help the defendant, help the person being accused. So you're the prosecutor, you have evidence, might help the one you're accusing, that you must turn it over to the defense attorneys. It is a law like gravity. Okay, maybe not like gravity, but it's a must do. It's a Brady rule. And the Brady rule violations are very, very serious. Prosecutors can be punished by the bar, even disbarred, over failing to follow the Brady rule. Because the whole point of prosecution is not to make sure you lock up the person you're accusing. It is making sure the systems of in our rule of law in this country were followed, and that the person who's being accused, that you may send off to jail, had every opportunity to defend himself. One point Sidney Powell makes is that the prosecutors, they don't get to decide what might be exculpatory. That's exculpatory, is just evidence that might help you get off. They don't get to decide what's exculpatory because they, the prosecutors, don't have any idea what you, the defense attorney, might be thinking of as a potential defense. They don't know what you might be thinking of as an argument to make, a different way to look at evidence, so they don't get to say, well, we didn't think you really needed that, so you can't have it. They have to turn over evidence that may be exculpatory, may help the defendant in his defense. So what Sidney Powell filed this Firebomb thing on Friday, and she's in front of Judge Emmett Sullivan. It's a whole other story. That is a judge who was actually part of a previous case in which we also had Sidney Powell involved back in the days, the Enron prosecution. Emmett Sullivan is not a timid man. He stands up for what's right. So back to this case. So she's in front of Judge Sullivan. Right now where they are is actually they're ready for sentencing. The prosecutors have announced that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn is no longer cooperating with them, so therefore they want to move to the sentencing phase. Sidney Powell is saying, no, we're not going to sentencing yet. She said the case is not ready for sentencing because she still needs a significant amount of time to review the mountainous file, but she also said there are serious issues to be addressed by the court before we can proceed. The government continues to deny our request for security clearances. They can say to her, well, we Sidney Powell, we the prosecutors can't give you that because you don't have security clearance. Sorry. She's his attorney. She's supposed to give him the best defense possible, and she needs a security clearance to see some of it. That's not her problem. If they won't give it to her, they're not following Brady, and that's really a problem for not just the court, but also the prosecutors have to decide, is the case important enough to give her that clearance? She actually argued that we've reached an impasse requiring court intervention. She had a motion to compel, and she actually said, she accused the prosecutors in this case, the Mueller prosecutors, of she said the case is ripe for a finding, ready for a finding of contempt of the court's standing order. She asked the judge to find the Mueller prosecutors in contempt of court. These are very, very serious allegations. I got to tell you, folks, Sidney Powell is a force to be reckoned with. She is brilliant. She is brave. Even what she wrote in her book, License to Lie, she wrote things when I was reading it. I mean, you should read it. It reads, I mean, you would think it might be like a novel because it's so amazing what happened in the Enron case and other cases where Senator Ted Stevens' case, other cases like that. You have her willing to name names, call out wrongdoing. She pointed out, as an example, that Andrew Weissman, a serious player in the prosecution in the Enron case, was a guy who was cooking up charges, making up crimes that don't exist in federal law, pulling together a piece of this law, piece of this law, piece of this law. Okay, you did this, and this constitutes a violation of law. Sidney Powell points out in her book, you can't do that. You can't make up stuff about what constitutes a crime. Those particular allegations about Weissman went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled 9-0, ruled against Weissman in favor of the accused, saying, Weissman, prosecutor, you cannot make up crimes. That guy Weissman arguably should have been disbarred for just that conduct, and yet he is a central player in the Mueller investigation. So this is the kind of thing Sidney Powell put in her book. She laid out the facts. So where we are now with Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Many of you know this was just one of those Mueller perjury trap setups they did. Another huge factor, which is just mind-blowing in this case. When Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was questioned, he's still working for Trump. He's questioned. He is asked questions by the FBI lawyers, including Peter Strzok and some other guy. Those two people went back to their offices and wrote up their summary of their interview with Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. They're 302s or 303s, whatever they're called, 302s, I think. They wrote them up and said, flat out, we completely believe him. We saw no signs he was lying. We saw no signs of anything amiss in anything he said. They completely believed him. Yet later what he was prosecuted for was lying to the FBI. This is one of those perjury setup things, folks. You can't believe how egregious and KGB-like the conduct was of our own government against Lieutenant General Michael Flynn because they simply hated Donald Trump. So here we have Sidney Powell. I don't know how this, I think the ruling on the hearing is September 10th. There's a hearing date set very soon. But this is a huge allegation by Sidney Powell that the government hid evidence, exculpatory evidence, in violation of the Brady rule. She's asking for, as you heard her say in the little clip, she wants dismissal of the whole dang case. She's saying you have this level of prosecutorial misconduct, And you have to have more of a punishment than says, okay, Sidney Powell, you can have 30 more days to read the evidence. Okay, government, you can turn over the evidence. This is the beginnings of cracking open, I hope, the beginnings of cracking open the egregious wrongdoing inside the Department of Justice and the FBI, all wrapped up in the Mueller witch hunt to try to get Trump for the Russia collusion that never happened. We are going to watch this. In fact, I was connecting with Sydney yesterday. We're going to watch this very closely and report back. But the idea of fighting fire, of being as firm, outspoken, unrelenting, this is the kind of fight that's needed in America today, because this doesn't go to just whether Flynn gets off or Flynn has to plead guilty or his guilty plea gets removed or he has to go to jail or not. It has to do with the question, do we have a rule of law in America? Or when you have the Department of Justice that has gone on a witch hunt against a political opponent named Donald Trump, just all law gets set aside because the DOJ wants to be sure to get somebody because they want to get Trump. It's a rule of law. Talk about a fundamental building block of America. The idea of rule of law, you either have it or you don't. If you don't, we're in terrible, terrible shape.